I'm Helen Partlow with Waypoint Immigration USA, and we just released a brand new free NIW Success Guide. It's a step-by-step roadmap showing you how the NIW works, the evidence USCIS looks for, and the mistakes to avoid. Download your copy today and start building your future in the U.S. Hello, everybody. Happy Tuesday and happy December. Thanksgiving was a couple of days ago at this point, and I'm sure we're all still full on that turkey. I have actually a funny story. We have two turkeys. So I was hosting this year, and the turkey I bought was frozen. It's been defrosting. But it was still frozen, so I had to go out. I had to get another fresh turkey, and then Thanksgiving morning, that one was still also a little bit frozen. But anyway, we've now had two turkeys since Thanksgiving, so some sort of Thanksgiving problems right there to share with everybody. But anyway, so I'm Helen Partlow. I'm an attorney at Waypoint Immigration, and I specialize in EB2 NIWs and EB1As, but we always talk about NIWs on these live videos. So I have been picking out different topics that I thought would be of interest to everybody and kind of making a schedule and changing the way that I've been doing things so that way you can attend the one that makes the most sense for you. So obviously today we're talking about your proposed endeavor, how to frame it, what does it mean, what's the best way to kind of go about it. And then the next one is going to be December 16th and talking about how to build your NIW profile for 2026. So that'll be the last one of the year because then it'll be Christmas break and our office is closed for that week between Christmas and New Year's. I know a lot of offices are, but that's kind of how we roll. So the 16th will be the last one for this year, and then I'll make another schedule for 2026 once we kind of come up to that point there. But today's information, is like general information. If you need any sort of specific guidance, we are more than happy to help you out with that. You can go to waypointimmigration.org, and you can also find, here, let me put the address there, waypointimmigration.org, and at the top you'll find appointments, and then you can search for, EB2 NIW, obviously, or we have other case types as well. So, we would be happy to kind of talk to you about your specific situation. So everything I talk about here is just general guidance, nothing that is specific. But EB2 NIW, I always like to start off with to combat some rumors out there, but the NIW does not grant you a status. This is not that kind of a thing. This will in time give you a green card. So if you are here in America already, most of our clients are H-1B or F-1, OPT type of people, you have to maintain a status until you get your green card. And that's for everybody. There is a backlog of at least 3 to 5 years. It's probably getting closer to the higher end of that time frame at this point. So if you want to come to America, if you are not in America already, you'll have to come in on a different status. H-1B is dual intent, so that means that you can intend to stay temporarily, intend to stay permanently, and all of that. So that works really well. It's a little bit trickier now if you are not already in America on obtaining this H-1B, since that is changing with the $100,000 fee if you need to go through consular processing. But it does not apply if you are already in America, like an F-1 student, and you want to change your status to H-1B. So that would be ideal because usually I would say your OPT will probably run out before you get the green card in hand. So just kind of keeping all of that in mind. So the NIW, so the National Interest Waiver, this entire application is founded upon what your proposed endeavor is. And that is how to say how you will be impactful to America in the future. It really lays a lot of groundwork. It's really meant to show the officer that you have a roadmap of how you will concretely make steps towards this progression. And it is not tied to your employer. It's not tied to any job title. It is a mission. So it's a mission focused thing, and we describe it early on in the application, and then we tie it to the 3 different prongs thereafter. So first prong, substantial merit, national importance. Second prong, well positioned to do your proposed endeavor. And then the third one is the balancing test. So all of these things relate back to whatever your proposed endeavor is. And while the proposed endeavor, when you are describing it to the officer, absolutely is future focused, it does have to make sense with what you have done because of that second prong, right? So you have to be able to also show that you're capable of progressing in this way in your proposed endeavor. So it can be a bit tricky on how to frame it for certain people because you might have a variety of experience in your background, maybe multiple different degrees, maybe you've pivoted from one area into the next. So you need to think about what is the theme across all jobs that you've had, across all degrees, and find that common thread and see how does that impact America. So, for instance, people in AI clearly can be implemented in pretty much every aspect of life at this point. So if you were originally doing AI for finance or something and making some sort of frameworks with that, and now suddenly you find yourself doing things for retail, like at Walmart or something like that, the AI is obviously the common thread. So you would be talking about, what have you particularly been doing in AI, how that will be impactful in the future. So, a couple of red flags with these proposed endeavors for when the officer is looking at it. Is it too employer centric? Are you saying, oh, my proposed endeavor is to continue working as a software developer? Because they're going to say that is a job title, that is not a mission, that is not a proposed endeavor, and therefore it cannot be, evaluated along the different prongs that we have to then argue after that. Another one is that is too past oriented. The second prong, showing how you are capable of doing your proposed endeavor, is definitely backwards facing. That is describing all of your education and your projects and the things you've accomplished. Maybe you've gone to conferences, had speaking engagements and whatnot. And that is where you're telling all of that in detail to show that you've already accomplished things, therefore you're capable of doing things in the future. But the proposed endeavor is very future oriented. They're going to want to know what kind of methods can you implement and techniques or technologies. How is this something that's scalable or maybe adoptable by others in the field? What kind of lasting impact will it have? They want to know where will that impact land, because if you just say something broad like I'm going to help advance AI, going back to that scenario, they're not going to be able to see where will that impact go. Like, is that in healthcare? Is it in retail? What will the end product be from the work that you're doing? What will that impact be? How will you be helping? What problem are you solving? Because that's definitely something to also think about when you're talking about your own proposed endeavor. What problem does your work solve? What comes of that work? If you are creating something, what happens with that end product? What happens with the result of your work? What does that help fix in America? So, could be things like technological advancements, public health and safety, national security. It could have to do with critical infrastructure. All of these sorts of things are in like the national importance, I would say. These are things that will help more than just your company. And that's really what we need to show when we are describing your proposed endeavor. So this really is the most important part, I would say, of an NIW. I mean, they're all important, right? But if you don't frame your national if you don't frame your proposed endeavor in a way that the officer can grasp what it is and make it seem like, oh yeah, this person really did think this through. They really have a roadmap. They really have a good idea as to what the future holds for them. If they can't see that clearly, they're not going to be able to adequately evaluate the other three prongs once you go into those arguments. So a couple of red flags just to repeat. Too employer centric, too tied to a job title, past oriented. Nope, it's got to be future oriented. And then maybe too broad, and they don't know where that impact would land. I would say those are probably the main pillars of a proposed endeavor that the officer can grasp. And again, if you are working in, a field that has a lot of jargon, a lot of detail and technicality, describing this in as simple of a way as you can, because the officer, they are not an expert in your field, right? They got to be able to understand what it is that you're talking about. They got to be able to say like, okay, well, why do I care that this even happens? That's another question to kind of ask yourself. Why should America care if this gets progressed or, advanced or whatnot? So these are all things to kind of mull around as you are thinking about it. And then when we're talking about the three different prongs that are stemming from your proposed endeavor, you want to make sure that it's all a really cohesive story. Like I said before, if you're talking about the well-positioned section and you are maybe a type of person that has pivoted from one thing to the next, maybe you have a publication from 10 years ago that you did during undergrad and it was a completely different, unrelated field. Like, you want to be careful with what you are submitting. You want to make sure that it all supports that same narrative, that same proposed endeavor, that it helps show that you will continue to be impactful in America. Or if you're not in America, that's fine too. You don't have to be in America. Actually just got NIW approved after RFE for someone that is not in America. So you just need to be able to tie your work in the country that you are doing, how it is relatable to America, what problems are you solving in your country that also are similar to problems here in America, and kind of translating it in that kind of a way. So I'm going to get to some questions. So if anyone has any questions, please put them in the comments, and I can go through them here live. And if you are watching it on the replay, you can always put a question in the comments after, or you can DM me, things like that. Okay, let's see. USCIS I-140 processing times are degrading. Can you give some idea on how service center times and functioning have changed under the new scopes classification for all centers? So definitely things are taking a lot longer. So if you do regular processing, it's taking like a year and a half. I would say a year and a half. I've been hearing a lot more towards that 18-month type of a range. And, at that point, we don't know what the law is going to be, if it's going to change. It's anticipated to be worked on in 2026, that there'll be regulations changing for the NIW. So your application will be adjudicated with whatever the law is at the time that it's being looked at. So if you're doing regular processing, it's, it's going to probably definitely be looked at, with some sort of regulation change that you didn't, of course, know of or anticipate when you were writing the application. And so we are suggesting premium for people in this regard. So it's up to 45 business days and it's $2,805. So it's definitely a lot of money. But you'll be able to get it adjudicated on a better timeline. And then some people say, oh, well, one might spike an RFE, versus another one. But I think all of these NIWs have a very high RFE rate at this point, whether or not it's premium or if it's regular. NIW I-140 has been pending in the last 13 months. So would you suggest at this time, given filing premium might lead to an RFE? Okay, well, I literally just discussed this. That's funny. Yeah, so I mean, if you can always upgrade it, and again, I think RFEs have the same higher level, whether or not you go through premium or if you go through regular processing. Okay, I don't see any other questions coming through. So I'll give it another moment or two, so please put your questions down if you do happen to have any. Other than that, I mean, I guess I can talk about a bit about what's to come for 2020. Oh, wait, there's a question. Does a direct denial of your NIW case ever happen, or do they always issue an RFE or a NOID first? So I have never seen a direct denial. I've seen them give an RFE most of the time. And then they give you about 3 months or so to respond to that RFE. And then if you did premium or regular would depend upon how quickly they would then look at it after the RFE was received back at USCIS. But yeah, I have not actually seen a straight denial or anything like that. Do you need a roadmap? Yeah, so when we're talking about proposed endeavor, they want to know how will you actually progress towards this, whatever the mission is. So whatever your impact will be on America, how will you actually do this? They want to see what concrete steps can you take. Do you have an understanding as to how to progress with it? You know, talking about what kind of methods or techniques, technologies, maybe some sort of collaborations you will have. You know, what does the future hold for you? Maybe also talking about it in short-term or long-term goals. They absolutely want to see that you have a well-established plan as to how you will progress with this proposed endeavor that you are describing in your application. Okay, I don't see any other questions. So, you know, we are suggesting for people to kind of proceed sooner rather than later, just because we're not sure what kind of changes will come. Considering how things have been, definitely don't foresee anything getting easier. So while we know what the parameters are, what the NIW framework is, you know, if you do have a viable case, obviously not going to submit anything that is frivolous or anything like that. But if you do have a viable case, you know, you could maybe consider if the timing is right now to do it before these changes come about. You know, there are some instances where I have suggested for people to wait, even with the unknown coming next year. So for that particular consultation, the person had, I don't know, over 10 years of experience in their field. But they had just left the job that they were at for the last 2 or 3 years, and they are just starting a new job. Like it was literally the same month that we were talking, and they did not keep any evidence of any past jobs. They obviously don't have any evidence of the new job that they are just starting. So they had no evidence, and they did not have any sort of industry contributions or, you know, like publicly available evidence, such as like a publication or anything like that. So in that instance, you know, while this person was being impactful and, you know, they did have a viable NIW case, they didn't have anything to back it up. So evidence is really crucial, and it's definitely become more and more crucial as this year has gone on. So making sure, if you are planning an NIW now or in the future, to be making sure that you are compiling as much evidence as you can, you know, dashboards and emails and internal like messages maybe that show that you did a great job, performance evaluations, any sort of the best type is the things that show the results of your work. So any sort of internal report maybe that has some sort of metric, you know, saying that you saved, you know, $2 million, or you increased efficiency by 9%, or, you know, whatever the case may be in whatever field you're in. Getting something that has that kind of concrete can be really impactful when you are making your application. So definitely keep that in mind. Okay, a couple more questions. Am I allowed to put screenshots on the proposed endeavor? So that is not how we go about it or anything. We compile everything as an exhibit, and then we make an exhibit list that tells the officer, what that exhibit number is, and then a brief description as to what that exhibit is. So then when we are doing things like discussing some sort of an argument or description, we then reference the exhibit list number, and then the officer can see, like exhibit, A number 4, A4, something like that. They would then be able to see from the exhibit list what A4 is, what the description is, and then they can go through your evidence and they can see, whatever has been labeled as A4. So that kind of keeps things, organized and clear without being too cluttered. If my visa expires while I'm applying, I have a valid I-20F1. Is that a problem for applying EB2 NIW? So if your visa is expiring, you should be going to another status. So, it's not necessarily a problem when applying for the EB2 NIW, but it could be a problem when you're trying to adjust status. So that is definitely a status type of question. And we take all sorts of consultations too. So if you wanted to do a consultation, we have one that I would say, either a complex immigration matter, which would be like an hour-long consultation, or we have a consultation services other, which is like 25-30 minutes consultation to discuss any sort of status issues and how that would impact, a later filing through, an adjustment or consular processing. Okay. I don't see any more questions. I don't think that there is anything else that I did not yet cover. Proposed endeavor, really important. Evidence is really important. As much objective evidence. And we're talking about quality, things that are on point to your proposed endeavor, things that make the most sense. Reference letters are important too, but to me, they're certainly not as important as your objective evidence. A lot of people I talk to just say, oh, well, I can get that said in a reference letter, but the reference letter is only going to get you a small part of the way. The reference letters need to be verifiable through evidence that you are submitting. So, if you had some part on some major project that really helped, increase efficiency or something like that, and you only have that letter of support, you don't have any evidence beyond that, it's not going to get you all of the way. The letter really only helps to contextualize and give story and to help describe the evidence that you are submitting, but they definitely do need to be verifiable. So you would need to submit proof of the project that is being discussed in the letter, as well as when you're describing it in your petition letter as well and going about it. All right, so I think that we will just end a few minutes early here today. So I will be back again December 16th. So if you wanted to, come back and watch that live, or maybe think of some questions to bring with you at that point, you can always message me. We're happy to take consultations. And I hope everyone has a great start to their December, and I'll see everybody in 2 weeks.